Welcome to another episode of the Sefer Chatter podcast. I'm Nachi Weinstein. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Ari Elias Backrack with thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for answering our prayers and returning our brothers and sisters to us. To sponsor an episode on the podcast or to support the podcast in any way, please email me, sfarmchatter@gmail.com, or you can find the link and information in the show notes below. You can also find the link in the show notes to subscribe to the Sefer Chatter WhatsApp community, where I post new books, new Sefarim, book deals, and more, as well as also find the link to the Sefer Chatter WhatsApp status if you prefer to get your information that way. Finally, some comments and notes a bit related to this episode, which is this is the third and final episode about the Rav Yosef Karo and Moshé series. I hope that everyone enjoyed. I've been receiving tremendous feedback. Anyone has more feedback, please email me, sfarmchatter@gmail.com, or if you're on the WhatsApp chat, you can directly message me on WhatsApp. Also, Moshé Kravetz, the guest, he is now publishing a new annotated edition of Sforno and Iyov, republishing the Amar Hagoyin, which is the Shiurim of the Sforno, Ala Torah, and he's also planning a new annotated edition of the Sforno on Tehillim. If you would like to support his work, you can please contact him by email. That's sforno, sforno.mk@gmail.com, or you can email me, and there'll also be a link in the show notes where you can donate to support. Also, for those that enjoy this mini-series format, which I've done a number of others in the past, the plan is to do one about the Arizal, Shifchei Ari, Toldos Ari, and then the history of the Kisvei Ari. And so if anyone interested in sponsoring an episode there in that series, they're looking for sponsors, you can email me, sfarmchatter@gmail.com. And also if you have other ideas for other mini-series that you want to hear, please reach out and let me know. And with that, enjoy this third episode and final episode on the mini-series by Rav Yosef Karo and the Sefer HaMaggid. Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of the Sefer Chatter podcast, and another episode, the final episode, here in this mini-series about Rav Yosef Karo and the Maggid Meisharim. And as with the other two, I'm going to be joined once again by Moshé Kravetz, who is the editor and mechaber, publisher of various works of the Sforno, Ala Torah, Anach, soon to be on Iyov, or when this comes out already be out, the Iyov Sforno on Iyov. But thank you, Moshé, for joining me once again.
Thank you for having me, and I'm happy that we're finally going to finish this mini-series, which took quite a long time.
Yes, it took us a long time. For the listener, they're probably hearing this in 1 week, and so they're going, okay, this makes sense. But for us, it took us, sometimes with these miniseries, I try to record them in one shot. This, took us a few months to get it done. So for the listener, if there's some overlap, please forgive us because we recorded the last episode a little while ago. Okay, so here we're going to dive into the last episode. There's a number of things to touch on. I think the first thing that we're going to start with is something that we've been pushing off throughout this series, and we mentioned it, obviously, but here we should dive into it because it's printed in the beginning of Sefer HaMaggid, as the Vat Shalom edition is called, or Maggid Meisharim, which is the Shavuos night letter, the letter of Rav Shmuel Kravetz. It's quoted in the Shloah, Masechta Shavuos. The Shloah is Masechta Shavuos, which is about Shavuos, the Yom Tov Shavuos, which is the famous story, staying up learning by Shavuos night. So, Ramesh, I'll turn it over to you. What's the letter, the history of the letter, the content of the letter, and how it pertains to Sefer HaMaggid, and so on?
Right. So, the famous letter, as you say, it was printed in the Shloah, which was actually printed almost the same time as the two editions of Sefer HaMaggid, the first volume and the second volume. I think it was right in between. So, actually, it's sometimes seen as something which is added to the Maggid Meisharim, but not really part of it. But actually, it sounds like that it was written as a Hakdama, as an introduction. And if we take the dates that we now know, thanks to Avat Shalom, we know basically when the Maggid started coming to the Beis Yosef. So we know that it started in Adar Reish Tzaddik Gimel, which means 1533. Now, it happens in Adar, and then you have a lot of, almost every day in Nisan, there's a mimer. And then eventually you get to Shavuos, and that's exactly when it happened. That means that it's like a few months after this whole thing started with the Beis Yosef. So Reb Shmuel Kravetz is actually telling us a story of what happens when he sees it for the first time. Now it's very interesting because Reb Shmuel Kravetz will probably speak about it later on. He himself was involved in the whole Isgalus of the Maggid, and sometimes he even interferes in the middle. So he was there, but now he doesn't know it yet because the way he describes it is the first time he's seeing it. Like they all fall on their faces and they can't, and it's like a shock, and they can't just take the Hashras HaShechina. And it's a very beautiful description, and it's very interesting. This was written by Rav Shmuel Kravetz, the letter, and it's signed by him, whereas the whole Sefer was written by the Beis Yosef himself. So this is not part of the usual Isgalus of the Maggid, which the Beis Yosef was supposed to write, and the Maggid even tells him, why didn't you write? And he reminds him the whole time to write. So this was something else. And this happened, it was the only time that happened with actually almost a minyan, and the second time was actually with a full minyan. So, as you said, it was printed in the Shloah Kodesh, who also brings some pieces of the Maggid Meshorim, and he quotes he explains some things from pieces of the Maggid even before it was printed, which were written by the Beis Yosef himself. And he tells us a story. The Shloah tells us that he got to Eretz Yisrael, and they were very mechabed him, and when he was in Tzfas, they gave him to see all the Ksovim. So he managed to see all what they had. It was 80 years after the Beis Yosef was Nifter. They gave him to see everything, and that's where he quotes from. Now, so it was printed actually when they printed the Maggid Meshorim as an introduction. And so what's going on in this moment? First of all, where is it going on? So that's also one of the points that now we know very clearly it happened in Salonika. Usually it was always thought that it was in Adirna, Adrianopol. It's 100% now that it was. We know exactly when the Beis Yosef moved from place to place. A lot of it because of the Maggid Meshorim, which tells us exactly, so that gave us some order in the whole chronology of the life of the Beis Yosef. So he's in Salonika. He moved there from Adirna, from Adrianopol. And Salonika then is at its height. That's where all the biggest Megoroshim of Sfard came in 1492. That's the Mokum Torah, and it's a huge community. You're speaking about one of the biggest communities of the time, maybe even the biggest, with a lot of Talmidei Chacham. You're speaking about just you have the Mari Ben Lev, you have the Marash Dam, who's a bit younger then. You have really a list of the most prominent Gedolim who lived there at the time, and the Rav of the city is Rabbi Yosef Taitatzak. Now, Rabbi Yosef Taitatzak is quoted in Beis Yosef. He's quoted actually in Rosh Tevis, because what the Maggid tells him about Rabbi Yosef Taitatzak is not very flattering. He tells him that the reason that he wasn't zoiche to the Gili, that the Beis Yosef was zoiche, even though Rabbi Yosef Taitatzak was the Rav of the city, and at the time it was considered bigger than Beis Yosef. He says the reason is because he likes money, which is very interesting when you know the Chido brings what kind of a Porush he was, and he didn't sleep in a bed, etc. And because also he gets angry. So he's telling him that there was some Pgam in Midas, that's why he wasn't Zoichet to Maggid. But actually we have a Maseres from the Rabbi Avram Azulai, who wasn't much later, and he tells us that eventually there was, he did get a Maggid, Rabbi Yosef Taitatzak. So he has his Beis Medrash, and the Beis Yosef has his own Beis Medrash, which we know also from Tshuvas Forum. We have one of the Tshuvas of the time tells us something, Eidus that was taken in the Medrash of Rav Yosef Karo. Medrash was the Beis Medrash, the Shul. So he had his Chabura, and there's a Chabura of Mekubolim. Now, what's interesting is that the letter is a very long letter. There's a lot of information, and it's sometimes very subtle. It's very hard to get out the information. What we do know now is 100%, you could see it from the letter, is that there's another group who were getting together on Leil Shavuos somewhere else. Which means that besides for the group in Salonika, there was another group getting together in another big city, which probably was Adirna, Adrianopol, where the Beis Yosef was before. So, and the reason they're getting together is because we're speaking about Mekubolim. It's already 200 years after the Zohar appeared. And in the Zohar, it says big things about staying up and learning, to be Mekash the Kala, to prepare for the Matan Torah, to be ready for Matan Torah. So they decided that they're staying up all night. And Reb Shem Alkabetz writes the first Tikkun Leil Shavuos. He's the one who decides what we're going to learn that night. So he actually gives the whole Seder of what he said they should learn. First Torah, then Nach, Mishnayos. And when they get to Mishnayos, the Maggid appears. Why is that? Because the Maggid always appears when the Beis Yosef is Mishnayos. And actually the Maggid says, Ani HaMishnah. Over here also, you have the same Lashonis. Ani HaMishnah, Ani... all these Lashonis that the Mishnah is betzim appearing to the Beis Yosef. And what happens now is that they're learning Mishnayos together, and the Beis Yosef starts speaking. So here you really have a description of how it works. Because he's saying that it's a different voice. It's coming from the Beis Yosef, but not from his mouth, and it's speaking out of Beis Yosef's mouth. But and his face is shining. You can't even look at him, and everyone falls, but it's not him speaking. So he's really describing, and then this voice starts telling them that you have no idea what great thing you did by this tikkun. The Shechina was in such a desperate situation, and you took her out of the dust, and then it goes on to tell them how great they are and how choshev what they were doing, and it's really a shame that you don't have a minyan, because if you had a minyan, you'll be zeicha even to much more. And that's basically what happens on the first night. Now, there were 8 people who were there the first night. That's why they didn't have a minyan. It seems that this chabura counted 11 people, because Rav Yosef then says the story that they went when they finished, they went to prepare for Shachris. They went to the mikveh, and when they go to the mikveh, they meet these 3 chaverim who didn't show up because they were tired and they went to sleep. And they were very upset with them. They told them what went on, and because of them, they weren't zeicha to more. And they were very, very saddened by the fact that they had missed the whole event. They weren't even there. And then they didn't sleep a whole day because they davened. And when they finished davening, there was a suda. And after the suda was a drosha. The Beis Yosef darshaned to the whole kehillah, but they had to be there also. And then it's already the night again, and the ones who weren't there suggested that let's try again. It's the second night of Shavuos, so maybe we could do again this tikkun. I don't know how many people today are noyeg that the second night of Shavuos to stay up. It hasn't been taken on so much to do the second night. But they started again the second night, and since they had a minyan, even before they got to I think it's as soon as they started the Mishnayos, it went much faster this time, and the Maggid appears again, and again telling them soides and secrets. Actually, a lot of the things that the Maggid said are not written in the letter. He's only saying what's negea to the story, but then he says that he spoke for an hour and told us a bunch of secrets. And then the Maggid says, and now is the time, you have to all get up and go to Eretz Yisrael, because Loi kol eitim shovos, and now is Zman Rotzin. You have to all get up and go to Eretz Yisrael. That's what he's telling them. What probably happened, the reason Reb Shlomo Alkabetz wrote this letter, it could be it was actually written, that's what it sounds like from the letter itself. It was written to the Bnei HaChabura, because years are going to go by, 2 or 3 years, and they're not yet in Eretz Yisrael. So he's actually writing them a reminder. This is what went on. So what are we doing? Why aren't we in Eretz Yisrael? He warns them, whatever, you got such a madrega, be careful, you have to go weiter, and you have to go to Eretz Yisrael. So it's like very, very stark. You're in a situation where you could only fall if you're not going to listen to the instructions. So this is probably why he's sending out the letter, and which brings to really a whole group going up to Eretz Yisrael, probably. It's even more than probably, as we'll see soon.
So yeah, this is a fascinating letter that I'm sure many are familiar, because when it comes to Shavuos night, it's like, wait, why are we staying up Shavuos night? It's not for the halacha. Where does it come from? And then you see this story. So everyone knows the Shalom, everyone knows this story. From there, it's printed it's, as you said, printed as an introduction to Maggid Meisharim. And so in the new one, it's printed there as well. And it's printed in the Shla. It's printed also in Chemdes Yamim as well. So this is a letter that gets around. And as you said, what's interesting is it's signed by Rav Yosef. So it's not written by the Beis Yosef. It's written by Rav Yosef. It's his edus of this event. And this has become to be a kind of central part. It's the introduction to the Maggid Meisharim. It's the first time that we hear about the Mishnah, the Maggid, showing up to talk to Rav Yosef Karo. There's that. Now let's talk about Rav Yosef generally, because I think this is where we should go with this. So Rav Yosef is, as you say, he's very close with the Beis Yosef, with the Rav Yosef Karo, with this whole chevra. They also goes up to Eretz Yisrael, to Tzfas, as well. And let's talk about him generally. We're not going to give a whole biography of him, but the author of L'Chadoidi that everyone says every week. So and Manas Alevi and Esther and many other Sfarim that he wrote, but that's I think the 2 famous things that people are familiar with him. But he also is a player, if you will, in the Sefer HaMaggid, Sefer HaMaggid Meisharim throughout.
Yes, he's much more than a player, I would say. I think he's one of the most underrated Gedolim of the time, because he lived through the whole story from the beginning until after all the others. He survived all the others. He lived a ripe, long life. And he was the Rebbe of the Ramak. So that's also his part of the story, the Ramak. And the Ramak is much younger. He's a brother-in-law. He's married to a sister of Reb Shlomo Alkabetz, but he's much younger. Reb Shlomo Alkabetz is actually much younger than Rav Yosef Karo. He's much younger. We don't know exactly when he was born. There's kinds of we have all kinds of indications. What we know is that he got married quite late. He got married in Reish Peites. I think that's when he wrote his Monos Halevi, the first edition of Monos Halevi. Because what we have, the Monos Halevi, is much more edited. There's much more, a lot of things that were added later on. Even his son added parts of it. It was printed after he died by his son. But he wrote it as a present for his father-in-law when he was engaged. Or either he was engaged or he had just gotten married, but he didn't have money to buy him a present to give him a nice Mishalach Monos, so he wrote the Monos Halevi, and that was his Mishalach Monos. So he was probably close to 30 when he got married. It sounds like he knew much more about all these kinds of revelations and Kabbalah, etc., than the Beis Yosef knew. And sometimes the Maggid tells the Beis Yosef that your Rebbe, Reb Shlomo, explained to you this. So he's like basically saying that even though Reb Shlomo Alkabetz was younger, but he was the Rebbe of the Beis Yosef in Kabbalah. Now you see it from the sform of the Reb Shlomo Alkabetz. One of the things that it gets me very irritated is when you see this form speak about the Meshorer, the poet Reb Shlomo Alkabetz. Well, Reb Shlomo Alkabetz wrote one poem that we know of. One poem, which is the Lechodoidi. We don't know of anything else that he wrote as a poem. He did write a lot of Sforim. He wrote on the Megillah, he wrote a Pirush on the Zohar, and I think that we even have his Pirush on the Zohar because it's probably part of the Pirush of the Ramak on the Zohar, which is a very, very long Pirush, but I think it's, the Ramak was a Talmud of Reb Shlomo Alkabetz, took his Pirush, and he edited it, made it even longer. Because we have some pieces of the Pirush of Reb Shlomo Alkabetz on the Zohar, and so he would start a piece of Zohar with asking 25 questions and then giving a long-winded answer. The Ramak will do exactly the same thing, except that he has 60 questions, 25 of which are the same as Reb Shlomo Alkabetz, and basically the answer is the same, but it's much more developed. So it sounds like that the Ramak actually was just building on Reb Shlomo Alkabetz, and that's why I think that Reb Shlomo Alkabetz was behind this whole Kabbalah revival in Sfas, and just in general, this whole Aliyah. As you see over here in this story, he's the one who sends out the letters to all the other participants and tells them, we have to go up to Eretz Yisrael. He goes up with the Beis Yosef. He comes to Tzfas, and over there he keeps a low profile. That's what's very interesting. He's behind everything, but you don't see him. He's not involved in the smicha controversy. He's not involved in. You don't hear him so much. Sometimes he shows up. For example, there was the Rav, one of the people in the. Maybe we should just jump in already. And one of the things I discovered is that we actually have a list of probably who were the people who were sitting over there around the table at the Beis Yosef's Tikkun Leil Shavuos. Because he's speaking about 8 people the first night, 11 people the second night. We know Reb Shlomo Alkabetz, we know Rav Yosef Karo. Who were the other people? So there was a Yid who lived in Salonika, and then he moved to Italy. His name was Shlomo Atiyah. Shlomo Atiyah was originally from Eretz Yisrael. He was from Yerushalayim. Then they came to Salonika, and Shlomo Atiyah had a very tough life. He went around from place to place. He was a Talmid Chacham. Eventually, he comes to Venice, and he prints in Shin Tes, which is 1549. Is that right? Yes, 1549. He prints his Pirush on Tehillim, which, if you look at it, it's very weird, because you have at the top of each page, the name of the Sefer is Shlomo Atiyah. That's what it is. At the top of each page is Shlomo Atiyah. It's, okay, it's, I went through a lot of it. I didn't find anything very exciting, but his introduction is very exciting because he starts writing, this is my story. I started off learning by the Megur Rosh Sfarad in Salonika, and then I moved here, I moved there, and he basically goes through all the Gdolim who he knew along his life. Yeah, he has like probably 80, 90 names over there, and all the famous ones. And there's a lot of biographical information which we could get from there. Now, you have to know how to read it, because there's a lot of questions being asked, the chronology, etc. But he's writing from memory, and he's writing as like suggested memory, like he's mentioning someone, so he remembers someone else that he met somewhere else. It's not exactly in the same places where he puts them that he actually met all of them. But it sounds like he's basically telling the story of, he starts off, who were the Chachomim in Salonika? First generation, who came from Spain. Second generation, all the Taitatzaks and all the, etc. And then he goes on to Adirna, Adrianopol, and other places. And then he goes back and says, and these are the Rabbonim who went from Salonika to Tzfas. Now, he's like, out of the blue, these are the people who went from Salonika to Tzfas. He's not speaking about the people who went on a long period, because, for example, he doesn't say about the Ralbach, who was his Rebbe. He learned by the Ralbach when he was still in Greece. He doesn't say that he went up to Eretz Yisrael. He doesn't say that. He just says that when he left, then he had to find a different place to learn. But he doesn't put them all together. Over here, he's speaking about a group, 7 names only, and the 2 last names are Rav Yosef Karo and Rav Shlomo Alkabetz. So that gives us ground to believe that the 5 first names are probably part of this group who went up together. Now, it doesn't mean that they, as we said, a few years passed from Reish Tzadik Gimel to Reish Tzadik Vov until they actually went, and in the meantime, Rav Yosef lost his family in a plague. He had to remarry, so he had to move out of Salonika up to Nikopol. So he leaves. Rav Yosef in the meantime leaves Salonika, goes to Nikopol, and then eventually they get organized, and we know that Rav Yosef with Reb Shlomo Alkabetz actually meet together in Adrianopol, and they go up together. Now, what's with the other people? When Reb Shlomo Alkabetz goes up to Eretz Yisrael, he also goes first from Salonika to Adrianopol. We have a drosha, which is his goodbye drosha, a very famous drosha of Reb Shlomo Alkabetz, which he gave in Salonika the Shabbos before he left. And then he gets to Adrianopol, and he stays there for like a few months, and he actually writes a sefer when he's there. And he writes a sefer, Bris HaLevi, on Agodah Shel Pesach. He writes it for the Chevraya Kadisha in Adrianopol, and we understand from the things that he talks about in the Akdoma and in the Sefer Bris HaLevi, that these people were also involved in the whole story of the Leil Shavuos. That means this was probably the second group which they were referring to, and eventually Beis Yosef with Rabbi Shlomo Alkabetz go to Tzfas, but then we find some other names which Shlomo Atiyah writes. So one of them is Rabbi Avram Shalom. There's a Rabbi Avram Shalom, a very famous one who died right after the expulsion. So that's probably his grandfather, the Nevei Shalom. Rabbi Avram Shalom was actually one of the Musmochim when they renewed the Smicha. He was one of the Musmochim. Then you have someone called Reb Shmuel Trani. Reb Shmuel Trani, no one knows who he is. He's probably related to the family of the Mabit. The Mabit was in Salonika, but he had gone much earlier to Eretz Yisrael. He was with the Mari Beirav well before all the others came in. So we don't know who this Shmuel Trani is. Then there's Achi Shmuel Atiyah. Reb Shmuel Atiyah was one of the Poiskim in Tzfas, and he also went up to Eretz Yisrael. Then you have Reb Yisrael de Coriel, who was also one of the Musmochim, and he's also on the list. So it sounds like this group, the ones he mentions, that was the organized group who were at the Isgalus of the Beis Yosef, because they got the instructions, go up to Eretz Yisrael. Now, how I got to that, I jumped a bit forward, but we mentioned Rabbi Avram Shalom. When Rabbi Avram Shalom passed away in Tzfas, he was a Rav of one of the big communities. Tzfas already then became, they had different communities as they had in Spain. And later in Salonika, so you had the Cal Major, which was from Castilla, and you had the guys from different places in Spain. So you had that in Tzfas also, because the community there became so big that you had to make it into a few Kalim, and the big Kahal the Rav was Rabbi Avram Shalom. And he passed away. And the one who was supposed to take over from him was Reb Moshé Alshich, the Alshich HaKodesh. He was the one who was senior Rav. He wasn't only a Maggid, There's shuvas from the Alshich. The Alshich was a poisik, and he was in his 60s, and it was very clear that he's going to take over. And actually, they organized already a Chtorah. They were going to crown him as the Rav who was going to take over. And Reb Shlomo Alkabetz appears, and he says, no, chas v'shalom. He says, the family of Shalom, Rabbi Avram Shalom, they come from 24 generations of Rabbonim. You can't cut it. So you're keeping the job for the son who isn't yet bar mitzvah. It's brought down in the Karo Adoiris that so. What's very interesting here is Reb Shlomo Alkabetz. He doesn't have any position in Tzvas, but you see he's behind the scenes. He's still always there. He's always behind everything. So over here also in the whole Sefer HaMaggid Meshorim, he's mentioned. Sometimes the Maggid quotes him and telling something that you were taught like this, and he's right, and sometimes actually he mixes in. He mixes in, which means that he could ask a question in the middle. That means that he was actually there when the Moshé Yosef was getting these revelations, and he could even ask questions himself, and the Maggid would answer him.
Wow, so definitely more important. I didn't mean earlier when I said he's a player that he was just like a guy hanging around. I meant like his specific part in Maggid Mesharim and throughout Maggid Mesharim is something that we can highlight. But definitely, you mentioned Basal Di Corial. That's the grandfather of Basal Najara. These are all famous. There's a whole, at some point I have to do a series or at least a podcast or two about what was going on in Tzfas in the golden age of Tzfas. There was so much going on and so many Gedolim and so many Sfarim. There's so much that comes out of there that we have still impacting us till today.
It'll have to be longer than Shabtai Tzvi.
Yeah, it's going to have to be very long. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so the other thing is throughout, I guess if you want to go here to Shlomo Molcho, and then this really will tie into or Shlomo Kravetz, which is the Shlomo Chavivi angle. Is that Shlomo Molcho? Is that Shlomo Kravetz? Who is Shlomo Chavivi in the Sefer? And we should mention Molcho. I think we mentioned it earlier about Molcho, but again, we're here to reiterate everything and to really emphasize what's going on in Maggid Mesharim.
So first of all, the connection of Shlomo Molcho to the Beis Yosef, we don't know if they actually met, but what we do know is that Shlomo Molcho, when he fled Portugal, he came to Salonika. And he actually learned by Rav Yosef Taitatzak. Not exactly clear. You had already a podcast about Rav Shlomo Molcho with Moti Ben Melech. But what is clear is that he was in Salonika. When the historians talk about Rav Shlomo Molcho in the Maggid Mesharim, it sounds like he's quoted the whole time. Now, what is quoted the whole time is one line where the Maggid is always promising the Beis Yosef, he's promising Rav Yosef Karo that he'll die al Kiddush Hashem. He'll be burnt al Kiddush Hashem. There's one single time that he actually mentions the name of Shlomo Molcho, and he says that you'll be zoichet to die al Kiddush Hashem, to be burnt, and like Shlomo Yedidi de Miskrei Molcho. So that's the one time where he's actually saying that Shlomo Yedidi. Now, what goes on through the whole Sefer is that he says Shlomo Yedidi, but he's always referring to Reb Shlomo Alkabetz, never referring to Shlomo Molcho. That's the only time he's actually mentioning him by name. But since there's so many times where he speaks about dying al Kiddush Hashem, being burnt al Kiddush Hashem, which is that's what happened to Shlomo Molcho. So automatically people thought that has to do. Now, if you take the book of Mor Altshuler, so she already decided that it's part of the I don't know how you call it, of the whole system of these revelations where the two Shloimos become one and the same, and she actually decides that even though he means Shlomo Alkabetz, but it's really Shlomo Molcho, and there's some halachas that she's explaining why Shlomo Molcho held like that. It's completely ridiculous because Yosef is not saying over any halachas from Shlomo Molcho. Even though Tosfos Yom Tov did bring halachas from the tzitzis, Magen Avram brings it, but Yosef did not bring any halachas from him, and anything that she's speaking about the Kaddish, about what if you say Omein Tabrichu or not, that's definitely 100% speaking about Reb Shlomo Alkabetz, not Reb Shlomo Molcho. Now, it does make sense that we have once mentioned this, Reb Shlomo Molcho is clearly mentioned, and there's this idea that the Beis Yosef really wants to die al Kiddush Hashem, and what is true is that there's all these revelations start about a year after the Molcho story, the tragedy happened when he was actually burnt al Kiddush Hashem. And being that Rav Yosef Karo could have met Rav Shlomo Molcho in Salonika, he could have had a connection with him, and he definitely knew what was going on because the whole Jewish world, it was at the center of everything. It was in Rome. It was Everyone knew what was going on, so it definitely probably did have some kind of influence, and that probably could be that where the idea of being burnt on the stake al Kiddush Hashem came from. But it's been really overplayed. The whole this whole Reb Shlomo Molcho in the Maggid Mishorim.
Yeah, and that's something that I think. Besides the Shavuos night story, which is not only from Maggid Mishorim, I think this is like the famous part of Maggid Mishorim that everybody knows. Oh, there's Shlomo Molcho part of it. Yeah, and I did the episode a couple of years ago with Mati Ben Melech. It was an excellent book on Shlomo Molcho in Hebrew only. And so you can look there, a lot of very interesting things and new discoveries, and go listen to that episode or read the book that Mati wrote. Okay, so as you say, Rosh Shlomo Kravetz, that's why I use the term player before. He really comes up throughout the Sefer HaMaggid Mishorim. Where to next? I think now we should turn to probably to focus on the halachas in Maggid Mishorim, because you mentioned how doesn't quote Shlomo Molcho halacha. Tez Yom Tiv does other quoting, but the Sefer HaMaggid Maggid Mishorim doesn't. However, there are halachas from the Sefer HaMaggid, and that gets into the thorny issue of Lo B'Shamayim. How could you have a Maggid telling you something and take it halacha? Torah Lo B'Shamayim. What's going on?
Right, so that's a really great question, and the truth is, I don't know how clear the answer could be, because you have to know what exactly the Agdara of Lo B'Shamayim. There's a sefer from one of the Balei Toises, Shedis Tshuvas Min HaShamayim, and it has a big introduction of from Reuven Margolius, and at the end he writes that he's preparing a whole dissertation on the subject of Lo B'Shamayim, which with regard to the Maggid Mishorim. So we never got that. I don't know if he actually finished it, or he didn't finish it, or he didn't even start it. I don't know exactly, but we don't have that dissertation for Reuven Margolius.
And by the way, also regarding Shabbos Min HaShamayim, it's worth mentioning that the Chidon Shem Agdolim, when he talks about Shabbos Min HaShamayim, he also talks about this whole issue of Lo B'Shamayim.
Right. And the Chidah goes so far as to say that if the Beis Yosef had known that a certain halacha says in She'esu Tshuvas Min HaShamayim, he would have passed in differently. Which means that the Chidah he comes to Maskana that Lo B'Shamayim means basically yes, but sometimes we do use in some, I don't know exactly how it's supposed to work. Could it be it's something that Lo B'Shamayim, if you don't know where it comes from, but if it's like you have Tutz Dodim and Min HaShamayim the Machriya, could be that does have some type of validity. Now, how much influence does the Maggid have on the Beis Yosef? First of all, the Maggid is talking to Beis Yosef about his writing, and he's telling him what he thinks of it. He says that what you wrote today was good. The 3 Terutzim on the Rambam, the 2 first were good. The third one is good for a pilpul. You can leave it. The Rebbeinu Shalom likes being the palpul, but it's not emes. And sometimes he actually tells him halachis. Sometimes he tells him like don't be mikabel this gears because she's not serious, or there's all kinds of revelations in halacha which he's telling clearly to the Beis Yosef. Sometimes once that we really see, I'll tell you something very interesting, because we're going now with this idea that Lo B'Shamayim, so the Maggid Mishorim shouldn't have any halachic value, but a Talmud of the Sma and the Levush, or Reb Shapsi Sefer Rashkov, not the Chassidish Reb Shapsi, the other one, the Talmud of the Levush with the Sma. So he writes that the reason that there's such authority to the Shulchan Aruch is because the way he says it, mi Rav Yosef Karo, mi Beisoy, the Beis Yosef, lismach al Shulchanoi. Like, why should we be seimach on his Shulchan Aruch? Lisparnes mimenu. And his answer is, he had a Maggid. So you see that Mishamayim, they were masking to him, so we have to be mekabel it. That's the whole authority of the Shulchan Aruch, because it's very interesting. He's a Talmud of the biggest poskim, and he's saying that that's the authority of the Shulchan Aruch, because Min HaShamayim, they were masking. Yeah, I'll give you an example. He writes that this is written in the Maggid Mishorim. He says that someone asked him that he had a bad dream, and does he have to do a Tanis Chaloim on Shabbos, fast on Shabbos? It sounds like the Rabbi Yosef Karo answered to the person who asked him the question. He said, I heard that you only have to fast for 3 types of dreams. This is not one of them, so you don't have to fast. Which is not written anywhere in our sources. and the Maggid tells him, what you told him was exactly true. That's what he was supposed to do. Now, how does it appear in the Shulchan Aruch? It's very interesting. The Rav Yosef should paskin from Oilam Oimrim Shenimtze Basforim Kadmoinim, and the reason he paskins like that is probably because he had this. The Maggid told him that's how you do it. There's another thing from when can you do Kiddush Levana? Can you do Kiddush Levana from the Gimel from 3 days into the month or 7 days into the month? So the Kabbalah is you wait for the 7 days. Actually, the time that he speaks to him about it comes out that it was on Motzei Shabbos, right after the Shavuos of the whole letter of Reb Shlomo Alkabetz. And then so it's probably after Shavuos came time for Kiddush Levana, and that's when he's telling him that you have to wait 7 days. And the B'Seisef Paskins, like he brings all the poskim that say that from 3, but he says no, Rabbi Yosef Gikatilya, the Sharer, the big Makubal, he says you have to wait 7, so you have to wait 7. That's how he paskins in the Shulchan Aruch. He paskins you have to wait 7 days. So over here he's really pasking al pi Kabbalah. It's a churma because you're yoytze anyway, right? So it's not a question of you're yoytze or not. But you see that there's a real influence of the Maggid on the Beis Yosef and on the Shulchan Aruch. Now, where it gets really problematic is when sometimes the Maggid tells him some things that are against the halacha, right? We have some stories like that also. The famous one, eating meat on Rosh Hashanah. He tells him you're not allowed to eat meat on Rosh Hashanah. Now, there's a Mishnah that says that you're not allowed to sell. You have to make sure that when you sell an animal on Erev Rosh Hashanah, one of the 4 times of the year, we have to make sure to tell the person that you sold the mother, so it shouldn't be oisiv as benoi, because everyone's eating meat on those days. And it's very clear that those are days where there's a big mitzvah to eat meat, is on Rosh Hashanah. So, and over here he's saying that, no, you're not allowed to eat meat on Rosh Hashanah. So there were all kinds of, trying to say that it was only anhoga for him, but it doesn't really go into the words. You see that he's really telling him that to eat meat on Rosh Hashanah is not the right thing to do for anyone. And that's really against the Mishnah. Actually, 2 Mishnahs, which are mashma that there's a mitzvah to eat meat on Rosh Hashanah. So this is where Reb Chaim Volozhin comes in. There's a Radal, Rav David Luria, in his Kadmus HaZoyer. So he has a chapter over there on the Maggid Meishorim. He's trying to prove the Kadmus HaZoyer. You had the whole mini-series on the Zoyer. You mentioned the Kadmus HaZoyer. And since he's dealing with the Zoyer, one of his proofs is you see how the Maggid of the Beis Yosef is so holds of the Zoyer is so important. So you see that the Zoyer is real. So he decides 1 minute, but there's some people who say that the Maggid is made up. So the Radal is very interesting because he's very rational. His answers, the answers that he gives are very, very intelligent. I mean, he asks all the questions that the academics ask, and he gives very strong answers. Like he says that the one of the things they say is that the Maggid is always telling the Beis Yosef, you're going to die al Kiddush Hashem, and it didn't happen, so it must be it's fake. He says if it would be fake, then that was the last thing a faker would have written. That's a proof that it's true, because if you write something that didn't happen, that it didn't work out, that's the last thing you do in something when you're trying to fake something. So that's actually a proof that the Maggid Meishorim is authentic. But when he gets to this question of the Mishnais against the psak of what he tells him to do, to not eat meat on Rosh Hashanah, so he says that Reb Chaim Volozhin said that at the time the Beis Yosef had forgotten the Mishnah, and the Maggid does not know more than the Beis Yosef knows. What he knows is actually only what the Beis Yosef knows. Since the Beis Yosef had forgotten the Mishnah at the time, so the Maggid could tell him something which was against the Mishnah. Which is fascinating, because it's a whole new way of looking at what the Maggid is. The Maggid is not this angel which comes with completely out of the world revelations. It's actually some power which is based on what the Beis Yosef has in his own head. And that's why Reb Chaim Volozhin is saying that if Beis Yosef had a mistake, he forgot something, so that actually the Maggid could tell him something which was against that Mishnah. Now what's really fascinating is that there's a proof from the same piece of Maggid Meishorim, 1 page before, And once again, it's with Reb Shlomo Alkabetz. Because this whole Gilui is happening on Parshas Nitzavim, which is right before Rosh Hashanah. So it's it was a revelation which happened on Shabbos night of Parshas Nitzavim. And that's where he goes into the instructions of how he's supposed to deal with the Rosh Hashanah. But before that, he gives him a shir on the Parsha. And the shir he gives goes like this. It says in the Pasuk, Atem Nitzavim Hayom Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem, Roshechem, Shiftechem, Zikneichem, Shoitrechem, Shoiftechem, and he explains it. And Reb Shlomo Alkabetz calls out, he says, yeah, that's not what it says. It doesn't say Shoiftechem v'Shoitrechem in the Pasuk. It doesn't say that. And what does the Maggid answer? So here's really, Reb Shlomo Alkabetz interferes in the middle, and the Maggid answers to the question that was asked by Reb Shlomo Alkabetz. And he says, but what I explain is only according to what you have in your head. And since you had in your head a mistake in the Pasuk, I explained you the Pasuk according to what you thought it said in the Pasuk. That means that the Rav Yosef actually had the Pasuk wrong in his head, and that's why the Maggid said a pshat, which was based on this wrong Pasuk, which didn't exist actually. Now he says, but you should know that the Pirish I said is actually true. You have to see how to fit it in. Which means that there is something true, but you have to fix it up in accordance with what actually the pasuk really says. So it's fascinating because I think that in the old editions until Avat Shalom it wasn't in the same date because this is Parashat Nitzavim and this is Rosh Hashanah and they chopped it up to make it according to Parshias and Moyadim. But once you have it, you see it all happens in one Isgalus, and you see that Reb Chaim Volozhiner was Mechavan Elo Emes, exactly what the Maggid himself answered Reb Shlomo Alkabetz.
Amazing. That's a really amazing pshat and a really amazing explanation for what's going on in the Sefer HaMaggid. And there's many other inyanim of halacha that I quote, but as you said, it's really the halachas that are the ones that are really so interesting at the Keneged, the things that the Maggid's telling him halacha that I Keneged the psak, but it's also obviously, the things that you would expect. It tells him make sure you're saying L'Shem Yichud before you're doing mitzvahs and various other things like that. There's a nice list in the Avat Shalom edition. You can see some of these in the introduction. You can also see various things that Musar van Hoggis Chasidus Mipi HaMaggid, so Torah and Segulis, Precious, Midas, various things, Dveikas, different things that the Maggid is telling. I mean, that's things that you would expect. Then you get to the whole halacha section.
I would add something. The Magen Avram brings, I think, 7 times brings the Magen Misharm, and Rabbi Eliezer Brot he has a paper on it in Yeshurun, I think he wrote about it, and he told me that he's still working out exactly when the Magen Avram decides to bring the Magen Misharm, because it's he's not bringing him exactly as halacha. He has a whole Lezbrot has a whole Torah on it, exactly what the story is with the Magen Avram with the Magen Misharm.
Fascinating. Okay, we'll ask Eliezer for that, and hope maybe we can find that information and put it in the show notes if there's a link to an article. Okay, now the next part to discuss is people and Svarim that are mentioned in Magen Misharm. We mentioned Shlomo Molcho, Rav Shlomo Kravetz. Who else is mentioned throughout the Sefer HaMaggid?
So if you're speaking about the Durs from before, you're speaking about the generations that... So of course you have the Rif, Rambam, and Rosh, which are the basis of the Beis Yosef. So that's why when he's talking to him about the Sefer Beis Yosef, they're always over there. And also you have the Ramban, the Ran, Rabbeinu Tam, Rabbeinu Yerucham, and they all have these names. Like you have Moshé Kedoshi and Moshé Bchiri. Bchiri is the Rambam, and Rabbeinu Yerucham, which is called Yerucham Tmiri, the hidden one, which they say has to do with the fact that that Rabbeinu Yerucham is from the Olam Hanelam, and that's why you're not allowed to reprint it. There's a whole raid about reprinting Rabbeinu Yerucham, and one of the sources for that is the fact that he's called Yerucham Tmiri. He brings Rabbeinu Yoina, Rabbi Yosef Jekatilia, Chovas Alvovas. Actually, he's told by the Maggid to learn Chovas Alvovas. The Torah, of course, Maria Buhab. Now, in his generation, he brings different chachomim. Like Reb Shlomo Alkabetz, as we said, Rabbi Yosef Taitatzak, who was the Rav Salonik at the time. At the beginning, there's a long it's a long series of revelations which had to do with the Eser Spheres, and exactly I don't really understand what it's about, but it's what exactly is part of Elokus, what's not part of Elokus, and very strongly about that. And he's speaking over there against the Mekubal who lived in Salonik at the time, Reb Chaim Ovadia Dibusal. He quotes also the Minchas Yude, Rabbi Yude Chayat. Basically, I think that's what I remember. They also in Avat Shalom. They also have the list of all the people quoted, and Reb Shlomo Molcha, of course.
Okay, so the Sefer HaMaggid is published for the first time in Lublin. I think I mentioned this way back in the first episode, and then it's printed afterwards in Amsterdam, and it's reprinted throughout. So, what about throughout the generations, especially since it was printed? I mean, of course, it was floating around in manuscript, but since it was printed, those that quote Sefer HaMaggid, you already mentioned Magen Avram, others, that's halacha, but if you want to just mention some that quote the Sefer HaMaggid throughout the generations.
So we already quoted. We said also the Shloah Kodesh quotes pieces. The Ramak was nifter 5 years before the Beis Yosef, quotes a whole piece of what Rav Yosef Karo was mekabel from his Maggid, which is really one of the big proofs that it's authentic and original, because it couldn't have been written after the Ramak died. So it was reprinted quite often. He's brought down a lot for the Musar, of when he gives him over the head for drinking too much and for not being mechaven the Shnai Mikra v'Chotargum, and these types of things. Mashgichim really like these pieces, and he's brought down a lot of Musar Shmus, and also the Musar Sforim bring down the Maggid Meshorim. There's various chuvas about you have it in about the. It escapes me now, but the Achronim brings a lot of times proofs to all kinds of things. It's never it's not the decisive proof to anything because of the Loi Bashamayim, but very often it brings siyata to something from ideas which pertain to halacha, which show up in the Maggid Meshorim.
What would you say, just from yourself, from your own experience, reading through Sefer HaMaggid, Mesharim, now that it's been, especially the new edition, because, for many years, centuries really, it was the Sefer HaMaggid Mesharim, and it was put together ala Seder HaTorah, ala Parsha, and it was this Parsha Sefer. Now, it's really, as we've discussed, a diary in the order that the Rav Yosef Karo did it, with all the new material from manuscript. You can really see the whole little, subheaders right in the beginning that we didn't always have. Now that reading it, going through it multiple times as you did, what can you say about it? And also, together with that, not only what you can say about it, who you think would, I don't know what's to say. I mean, this is the Sefer Rav Yosef Karo, so like I say, who is it for? Who should read it? Who would benefit from it? I mean, everyone to some degree. But what? Essentially that question, but with the caveat.
Right. So the truth is that the first time I read it was already with this new edition. I mean, I knew it before, and I had read pieces here and there, but it's only when the new edition came out, that's when I started going through it. And as someone who knows a bit of history, it's really fascinating, because you could really read it as a diary, and you have a lot of pieces you don't understand. I mean, I don't know how many people do understand everything. There's a lot of Kabbalah, but there's a lot of pshat, and there's a lot of nice pshatim in the Chumash, and sometimes in Chazal. And a lot of fascinating things about Gilgulim, the Gilgul of the Beis Yosef's wives, etc. First of all, anyone who wants to know about, there's no biography till today, a real biography of the Beis Yosef, which has no serious work has been done yet. And I think that it really couldn't have been done until this edition came out. Now that it came out, I think that there's a lot of information which is going to come out. There's a lot of work to be done. I wrote a lot of different. I sent them in to Avat Shalom, a lot of different discoveries which you could see, which you could put together from the life of the Beis Yosef once you have the full picture in front of you. But it's gonna keep on going. There's always going to be new information from what we have now, and they still have a third of the Sefer which is at the end, which is not yet according to dates. They don't have a full. Which actually I managed to situate about 20 of those pieces, but there's another 100 and something to. But eventually, we'll be able to get a full picture. It's really fascinating. Now, first of all, the introduction is for everyone. The introduction of Avat Shalom is fascinating. That anyone could really like it, and the Igeris of Leil Shavuos, which is also something which everyone likes and interested. And now you have a much better edition. They also took care of the mistakes and different manuscripts. The Sefer itself, it's you have to have patience, and you have to like the type of material. There's a lot of interesting material, but I would say for a regular yeshivish guy, that's not what he's looking for. But something with a broader thing, with some interest for Kabbalah or history, there's a lot to see from there.
What's interesting is you said there's no biography in Rabbi Yosef Karo, so I'll mention what does exist, and then if you want to, I want to just clarify what you mean by that. So we have obviously Greenwald's book, which we mentioned him and what his opinion on Sefer HaMaggid is. You have Warbalowski's lawyer and mystic. You have his opinion on things. You have more Altshuler, which you've mentioned. There was a like collected volume a couple of professors put out through Shazar a few years ago in Rabbi Yosef Karo. And then you have obviously Meir Ben Yo's Yosef Bechiri, which is not traditional biography in the sense. I think there's a lot of the fights between Rabbi Yosef Karo and the Mabit in there. A lot of their disagreements. A lot of them. Right. They're a fascinating book. And Avat Shalom used that extensively in their introduction. They mentioned they used that book, Ben Yo's book. So those are a lot of what exists. I'm sure I'm forgetting some other things as well. But I guess just to clarify, you think that those are all deficient.
Well, as you say, Bnei is basically on Tzfas. It's not on the Beis Yosef. The Warbalowski is like based almost completely on his idea of putting together the night Rabbi Yosef Karo and the day Rabbi Yosef Karo. So there is very good information there. There's, of course, the best is still more Altshuler. She really put together a lot of information and worked with it. But first of all, she didn't have this edition, and her way of trying to get the information out of the Maggid Meishorim without understanding it, with trying to figure out the codes without knowing Kabbalah, it's there's a lot of fluff, which not real data. But there are at the beginning, at the end, the purely biographical is great. That's really where you start. But now I think that this has to be taken with all the new information, and someone will have to do a real bio on this Yosef.
Okay, so there's what to add, definitely. Okay, so that's really a lot about the Maggid Meishorim, and I think here somewhat of a biography of Yosef Karo, although this series also wasn't the proper biography of Yosef Karo. A lot more we could do much more on a biography, perhaps with more Alshul or others in the future on the podcast. But here is a little bit of something on Yosef Karo. I really haven't done much of anything at all on him until now. Now, let's turn briefly at the end to you. What are you working on now? Any Sforno? I think Eiv is coming out. What's in the plans?
Right, so Mitzvah Hashem, Sforno on Eiv is supposed to come out next few weeks. I hope it'll be up by the time this airs. It's been it's a maksha leilid. It's really taking a long time, but Baruch Hashem, it's already typeset and it's ready to go to print. So that's a thing. I've been asked also to reprint the Amar Agoyin on Chumash. On Tehillim, I still have some. So whoever wants some could somehow. The distributor went bankrupt, so I don't have a distribution anymore for the Sforno that already came out. Mitzvah Hashem, we might take care of it when we get to Eiv. So maybe that will be taken care of with a new distributor. But the Sforno on the Omar Agoyin on Chumash is very much in demand, and I really wish I could reprint it.
So that's essentially a funding appeal. If anybody's interested in reprinting it, you reach out to Rabbi Kravetz if you want to tell everyone your email, or you can reach out to me. I'll put you in contact with him. It's a wonderful work. For those that aren't familiar with Omar Agoyin on Sforno, this is Rabbi Kravetz found the manuscript written on the side of a Ralbag Al-Tahir, I believe. It's a Talmud of the Sforno wrote. So he wrote Omar Hagoyin. Every time the Sforno was the shiurim of the Sforno gave Chumash year, and he would write down. So it really helps us elucidate some of the things in the printed Sforno, some other material that we don't have in the Sforno. So it's a very fascinating sefer, and like I said, the Tehillim is around as well. So if you want to tell them in your email, and then are you working on any other more Sforno material after this?
Well, actually, my PhD thesis was a transcription of the Omar Agoyin, but not the Omar Agoyin. The author of the Omar Agoyin is Rebbe Adinola. He wrote his own Pirush on Tehillim, a huge Pirush on Tehillim, 1,000 pages. So I transcribed it, and I would like also to publish it sometime. I don't know how many I'm going to sell of that, but it's fascinating. It's a huge commentary. There's an introduction to every chapter in Tehillim, a huge introduction, like taking some philosophical theme or some parasha or a medrash, and going through all the different approaches from Aristotle, Maimonides, then goes to Ramban and Sefer HaMaggid, and then he gets to Kabbalah. So really fascinating how he takes all kinds of 150 different themes and works through them and compares all the different approaches until he gets to some point which he's going to use to explain that the chapter in question of the Tehillim. So that's also something that I hope to be able to put out sometime.
And we're still waiting for the biography on Sforno. We're still waiting for that. That has to come out at some point. Okay.
At some point, it will come up, Mirz Hashem. Li Neder.
All right. Bez Hashem. Okay, very good. So I will, I guess in the show notes, I'll try to find a link to the Avat Shalom Sefer HaMaggid, Maggid Mishar, but it's widely available in Sfarim stores. If anyone interested in it, really wonderful volume, wonderful introduction, really an interesting, fascinating introduction, and, Sefer HaMaggid. The one thing I will mention for listeners is, number one, if you want it arranged, I'll say that, Torah, then you still kind of need the old one. Another thing that for some people might have somewhat of a drawback is that there's a lot of Aramaic in here, as one would assume, and it's not translated. So if you want that crutch, the one, the nice brown cover, Maggid Mishar Man Chumash, the newer one, that has the translation of the Aramaic. But I guess if one's reading Sefer HaMaggid, they don't need it, but whatever. The point is, it's not translated, and this is a critical edition. They didn't translate the Aramaic. Just worth mentioning to the listener what's going on. So there's that as well. And with that, thank you very much for joining me. We finally got this done. I'm sure there may be some overlap. There's much more to talk about. Sefer HaMaggid, Maggid Misharim, whatever you want to call it, and just Rav Yosef Karo generally. But this was just the tip of the iceberg. But here, just to give the listeners some information about this fascinating Rav Yosef Karo and the fascinating Sefer. So thank you very much for joining me for these 3 episodes.
Thank you. It was really fun. And I hope to be back sometime with maybe something on Eiv, on Sworn on Eiv.
Be'ez Hashem. Okay, be well.